The billionaire married a paralyzed woman unknown she'd miraculously walk again. San Diego, California, a city where power and wealth rule, and secrets lurk behind every glamorous event. Ronald Grayson, a powerful billionaire, had everything, except someone who loved him for more than just his money. Amy Walter, once a hopeful dancer, was now trapped in a wheelchair after a tragic accident. People saw her as weak, broken, helpless, but she refused to let life defeat her. When fate brings Ronald and Amy together, neither of them expect the life-changing journey ahead. He marries her out of duty. She accepts out of desperation. But what happens when Amy discovers a dark secret about her accident? And how will Ronald react when he realizes the woman he married isn't as fragile as she seems? What if you were given everything? Wealth, power, influence. But the one thing missing was true love. Stay with me until the end, because this story will take a turn no one sees coming. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, let me say something really personal to me right now. We spend hours making these videos, hoping they reach people all over the world. One of my biggest goals is to share valuable lessons about love, humility, and kindness so we can have a better world together. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments. Now, let's begin. The grand ballroom pulsed with life, a glittering expanse of wealth stretching wall to wall. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, scattering light across the sea of tuxedos and gowns. Ronald Grayson stood near the edge of the crowd, a champagne flute dangling from his fingers. His dark hair was swept back, his jaw sharp beneath the glow, but his eyes betrayed him. Restless, searching, hollow. Women flocked to him, their laughter bright and artificial, each one vying for his attention. A brunette in a sapphire dress brushed his arm, her voice lilting as she gushed about her family's vineyard. He murmured a polite response, his smile tight, but inside he felt the familiar void yawn wider. Billions lined his accounts, power hummed in his name, yet here he was, suffocating under the weight of it all. Across the room, Amy Walter lingered near a towering floral arrangement, her wheelchair half hidden by its shadow. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers tracing the worn fabric of her dress, a simple black dress, out of place among the extravagance. Once she'd danced through nights like this, her confidence a match for any heiress. Now, her hazel eyes tracked the crowd with a mix of disdain and longing, her lips pressed into a thin line. The accident had stolen more than her legs. It had stripped her of her place in this world. A waiter paused beside her, offering a tray of drinks, and she dismissed him with a curt shake of her head. She didn't need their pity or their sparkling wine. The mood shifted when a man lurched through the throng, his steps unsteady, his glass tipping precariously. Amy saw him too late, his trajectory aimed straight for her. She braced herself, breath catching, but before the wine could spill, Ronald appeared. He slid in front of her, one hand steadying the drunk's arm, the other deflecting the glass. The liquid splashed across the floor, a crimson stain blooming on the marble. The man slurred an apology and stumbled away, leaving Ronald standing there, his presence towering yet calm. Amy tilted her chin up, her gaze sharp. "You don't have to play the hero." "I'm not a charity case." Ronald's lips quirked, a flicker of amusement in his gray eyes. "I never said you were." She huffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please. The knight in shining armor routine. I've seen it before. Doesn't impress me." He didn't back off, didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, his voice low. "Good thing I'm not trying to impress you. Maybe I just didn't want to mop up wine tonight." Her eyes narrowed, but a reluctant spark flared in them. He wasn't coddling her, wasn't dripping with sympathy like the others. She opened her mouth to fire back, but a woman in a gold dress sashayed past, her laughter loud and grating as she tossed Ronald a flirtatious glance. He barely acknowledged her, his focus still pinned on Amy, and that threw her off balance. "What's your deal?" she asked, suspicion threading her tone. "Why waste your time on me when you've got a whole flock over there?" "They're boring," he said flatly, glancing at the giggling cluster across the room. "You're not." The bluntness hit her like a gust of wind, stirring something she couldn't name. She swallowed, forcing her walls higher. "Lucky me," she muttered, but her sarcasm felt thinner now, less certain. The gala rolled on, hours stretching beneath the hum of violins and clinking glasses. Ronald didn't leave her side, not fully. He drifted nearby, returning with dry remarks that coaxed reluctant smirks from her. She hated how easily he kept her talking, how his quiet intensity slipped past her defenses. He wasn't like the others, fawning over her tragedy or pretending she didn't exist. He saw her, and that made her chest tighten with something she hadn't felt in years. Later, as the crowd thinned, they found a quiet corner. Ronald sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and dropped his voice. "I need to ask you something." Amy stiffened, her fingers curling into her palms. "If it's about my legs, don't bother. I'm not here for your curiosity." "It's not that." He paused, exhaling through his nose. "It's about me." Her brow creased, unease prickling her skin. "What about you?" "My grandfather died last month," he said, his tone steady but heavy. "Left me everything. The company, the estate, billions. But there's a condition." He met her gaze, unblinking. "I have to marry within 6 months or it's gone." Amy blinked, the words sinking in slowly. "And this has what to do with me?" "I'm asking you to marry me," he said. No hesitation, no flourish, just raw, impossible truth. She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that echoed in the space between them. "You're out of your mind. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he countered, his voice firm. "You're not after my money. You don't care about my name, and I think you need this as much as I do." Her laughter faded, replaced by a cold weight in her gut. He couldn't know about her stepmother's ultimatum, the letter that landed like a guillotine 2 days ago. "Be useful or be gone," it had read, her stepmother's handwriting cruel and precise. No home, no funds, no mercy. Amy had lain awake since, panic clawing at her, and now Ronald sat there, dangling a lifeline she didn't want to need. "Why me?" she whispered, barely audible. "Because you don't want me," he said simply. "That's why I trust you." Her throat burned, her mind a storm of disbelief and desperation. She wanted to shove him away, to tell him to find some other pawn. But the clock on her stepmother's threat ticked louder, and the ground beneath her felt thinner every second. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice tight, betraying nothing. Ronald nodded as if he'd expected that. "Don't take too long." Days bled into nights, each one a battle between pride and survival. Amy replayed his proposal, his steady gaze, the way he'd cut through her armor without trying. She hated the flicker of warmth it sparked, the dangerous pull of possibility. Her stepmother's deadline loomed, a shadow growing darker, until one night she couldn't stand it anymore. She dialed his number, her hand trembling. "Fine," she said when he answered. "I'll do it." The engagement party came fast, a spectacle of wealth in Ronald's sprawling estate. The grand hall gleamed with polished wood and glass, guests swirling through it like a tide. Amy sat at the heart of it, her navy gown sleek against her frame, her hands clasped to hide their shaking. Ronald stood beside her, his presence a quiet shield, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Whispers rippled through the room, envy, intrigue, judgment, and Amy felt everyone like a pinprick. This wasn't love, wasn't a fairy tale. It was a deal, and she wondered how long she could play the part. A woman approached, her silver hair gleaming under the lights, her red lips curved in a knowing smile. She bent close, her voice a hiss against Amy's ear. "Do you really think he'd marry you if he knew the truth?" Amy's heart slammed against her ribs, her breath hitching. She turned, but the woman melted into the crowd, leaving only questions in her wake. Ronald's grip tightened, his voice low. "You okay?" "Yeah," she lied, forcing a smile. But her mind raced. What truth? What didn't he know? The morning of the wedding arrived with a crisp, unrelenting brightness, sunlight pouring through the towering windows of Ronald's estate like a flood. Amy sat before a gilded vanity, her reflection a paradox in the mirror. Ivory lace clinging to her frame, a gown so exquisite it seemed to mock her. The fabric shimmered with every breath, the long train pooling behind her like a river of light, but her hazel eyes glared back, stormy and defiant. Her chestnut hair was swept into an elegant updo, soft curls framing her face, yet she felt like a doll dressed for someone else's game. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her veil, twisting the delicate material as a knot tightened in her chest. This wasn't a celebration. It was a sentence, a bargain she'd struck to keep a roof over her head. She pressed her lips together, tasting the bitterness of it all. Downstairs, Ronald stood in the grand foyer, adjusting his cufflinks with precise, practiced motions. The black tuxedo fit him like it was tailored by the gods, accentuating his broad shoulders and lean frame. He caught his reflection in a nearby mirror, dark hair swept back, jaw sharp, gray eyes steady. But beneath the polish, a flicker of something softer stirred. He'd spent weeks with Amy, peeling back her layers, her sharp edges cutting through the noise of his world. She wasn't like the women who chased his name or his fortune, and that hooked him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Today he'd bind himself to her, not just for the will, but because a quiet part of him wanted to shield her, to give her something real. He smoothed his tie, exhaling slowly, and headed outside. The ceremony unfolded in the estate's sprawling garden, a sea of white chairs stretching across the manicured lawn. Guests murmured behind their programs, their eyes darting between curiosity and judgment. Amy's wheelchair glided down the aisle, an attendant guiding her with silent efficiency. She kept her chin high, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, though they trembled beneath the veil. Ronald stood at the altar, his gaze locking onto her as she approached. When she reached him, he stepped forward, kneeling slightly to take her hand. "You look incredible," he said, his voice a low rumble, meant only for her. She tilted her head, searching his face for a lie. "I don't need flattery," she shot back, her tone sharp, but her fingers lingered in his grip before she tugged them free. He straightened, unfazed. "It's not flattery if it's true." The officiant cleared his throat, and the vows began, brief, mechanical, a script they'd memorized to satisfy the lawyers. "I, Ronald Grayson, take you, Amy Walter, to be my wife." His voice was steady, but when he slid the ring onto her finger, his touch was slow, deliberate, almost tender. Amy's breath hitched, the cool metal settling against her skin like a brand. "I, Amy Walter, take you, Ronald Grayson." Her words came out clipped, but her eyes flickered to his, and for a fleeting second, she wondered what she'd just promised. The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of sound that felt hollow to her ears. Ronald offered his arm, and she hesitated before resting her hand on it. "We did it," he murmured as they turned to face the guests. "Yeah," she replied, her voice flat. "Lucky us." The reception swept them into the grand hall, a whirlwind of crystal and velvet. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over the long tables, champagne flowing like water. Amy sat at the head, Ronald beside her, his presence a quiet tether in the storm of chatter. He leaned over, sliding a glass of water her way. "You don't strike me as the champagne type," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. She arched a brow, taking it. "You're learning fast." She sipped, her guard easing just enough to notice how he deflected the hovering guests, politely, firmly, keeping them at bay. "You don't have to babysit me," she added, her tone dry. "I'm not," he said, meeting her eyes. "I just don't like vultures." She snorted, a reluctant smirk tugging at her mouth. "Fair enough." The night stretched on, music weaving through the air, laughter rising and falling. Amy excused herself hours later, needing a break from the noise. She wheeled toward a quieter corridor, the hum of the party fading behind her. She paused near an arched doorway, catching a fragment of conversation that froze her in place. Two men stood just beyond, their voices hushed but jagged. "Wasn't supposed to be her," one growled, his tone rough with frustration. Grayson was the target. "She just got in the way." The other man scoffed. "Too late now. She's still here and he's got her tied up tight." Amy's blood turned to ice, her hands clamping onto the armrests. Her accident roared back, the crunch of metal, the searing pain, the endless fall into darkness. She thought it was random, a twist of cruel luck. But this, someone had meant to hurt Ronald, and she'd been the casualty. Her chest heaved, her mind spinning with rage and dread. Who were they? Did Ronald know? She wheeled back toward the hall, her pulse hammering. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. She didn't even know if she could trust him. Weeks passed, their marriage settling into an uneasy dance. Ronald surprised her with small things, carrying her upstairs when the elevator lagged, his arms steady and warm. "You don't have to," she'd mutter, but he'd just shrug. "You're lighter than you think," he'd say, setting her down with care. Mornings found them in the penthouse kitchen, coffee steaming between them. "What's on your mind today?" he'd ask, leaning against the counter, his sleeves rolled up. She'd roll her eyes. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Try me," he'd counter, his tone light but persistent, and she'd find herself talking about books, about the city, about anything but the secret gnawing at her. One rainy evening, the world outside blurred behind sheets of water, the penthouse a cocoon of soft light. Ronald knelt by her chair, draping a blanket over her legs. "You're cold," he said, his fingers brushing her knee as he tucked it in. She froze, caught by the gentleness in his touch. "I can manage," she said, but her voice wavered. "I know you can," he replied, his hand lingering. Their eyes met, and the air shifted, heavy with unspoken weight. She leaned closer, her breath shallow, and he didn't pull back. His palm slid to her cheek, warm and grounding. "Amy," he started, his voice rough. "Don't," she whispered, but she didn't move away. The space between them shrank, charged and fragile, until a clap of thunder broke it apart. She pulled back, her heart racing, and he let her go, his jaw tight. The next day cracked her open. She wheeled into the study, looking for him, and stopped dead. Ronald stood by the window, sunlight framing him, and her. Lila, his ex-fiancée, all blonde hair and sharp cheekbones, laughing as she touched his arm. "You always were stubborn," Lila teased, her voice smooth as silk. Ronald didn't laugh, but he didn't step away either. "Some things don't change," he said, his tone neutral. Amy's stomach lurched, a bitter tide rising in her throat. She'd seen Lila in old photos. Perfect, poised, the woman he'd once chosen. Was this why he'd been so kind? A game to keep her close while he played another? The secret about her accident burned hotter. Maybe he'd known all along. Maybe she'd been a pawn from the start. She turned away, her hands shaking, and locked herself in her room, doubts clawing at her. By morning, she couldn't take it. She found him in the kitchen, pouring coffee like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cold, her resolve steel. He turned, brow furrowing. "What's going on?" "You tell me," she snapped. "Lila, yesterday." "What was that?" His eyes widened, then softened. "Amy, it's not..." Don't lie to me, she cut in, her chest tight. And there's more. I heard something about my accident. It wasn't an accident, Ronald. It was about you. His face paled, coffee forgotten. What are you talking about? She opened her mouth, ready to spill it all. The men, the plot, her fear, but the room tilted. A wave of dizziness slammed into her, her vision swimming. Ronald, she gasped, her hands slipping, and she collapsed, his shout ringing in her ears as the world went black. The weeks after Amy's collapse draped the penthouse in a thick, uneasy quiet, broken only by the soft shuffle of staff and the distant hum of the city below. She woke in a hospital room, the sharp tang of antiseptic biting at her senses, her limbs heavy as if tethered to the bed. Ronald stood by the window, his silhouette stark against the sterile white walls, his broad shoulders tense beneath his jacket. He turned as she stirred, his gray eyes locking onto hers, shadowed with a worry that cut deeper than she expected. "You scared me," he said, his voice low and rough, stepping closer to her bedside. Amy pushed herself up, wincing as the IV tugged at her arm. "I'm fine," she muttered, her tone sharp to mask the tremor inside. "What happened?" He dragged a hand through his dark hair, disheveling it. "They don't know yet. Dehydration, maybe stress. Your vitals crashed. They're still figuring it out." He paused, his jaw tightening as he leaned closer. "You were about to tell me something about your accident. What was it, Amy?" Her throat closed, the memory of those overheard words. Grayson was the target, surging back like a tide. But Lila's laughter, her hand on his arm, flickered in her mind, and she shoved the truth down. "Nothing," she said, turning her face toward the wall. "Just drop it." His frown deepened, his voice softening but insistent. "Amy, if something's wrong, I need to know. We're in this together now." "Are we?" she snapped, her eyes flashing back to him. "I said forget it, Ronald." He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded, stepping back with a sigh. "All right, but I'm not going anywhere." The tension hung there, a fragile thread stretched tight, and she hated how his quiet resolve made her chest ache. Days later, back at the penthouse, a letter slipped under the door. Plain, unmarked, trembling in Amy's hands as she tore it open alone. "I've been watching you, Ms. Walter. I can help you walk again. Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., St. Clair's Clinic. Tell no one." Her breath hitched, her pulse a wild drumbeat. A trick. A lifeline. She traced the ink, her mind racing. Hope had been a ghost to her, long banished, but now it whispered, sharp and relentless. The next morning she wheeled into the kitchen where Ronald stood, coffee in hand, his shirt sleeves rolled up. "I'm going out," she said, keeping her voice casual. "Need some air?" He glanced over, his brow creasing. "Want company?" "No," she replied, too quick, softening it with a shrug. "Just me today." He nodded, but his eyes lingered, searching. "Be careful, okay?" She forced a smile, her heart twisting, and left. St. Clair's Clinic loomed on the city's fringe, a squat building with peeling paint and a faded sign. Inside, a man waited, lean, mid-40s, with piercing blue eyes and a white coat that hung loose on his frame. "Ms. Walter," he said, extending a hand. "Dr. Elias Hart. I've followed your case for years." She wheeled closer, her gaze wary. "My case? What's that supposed to mean?" He pulled a tablet from his bag, tapping it alive. "Your accident, spinal cord trauma, incomplete severance. I've developed a treatment, nerve regeneration, electrical stimulation, targeted rehab. It's experimental, but it could bring your legs back." Her chest tightened, a cocktail of doubt and yearning. "Why me? Why now?" He met her eyes, unflinching. "Because you're a survivor. I've seen your scans, your fight. You deserve this chance." She crossed her arms, skepticism a shield. "And what's in it for you?" Nothing, he said, his voice steady. Just proof it works. 3 months, twice a week, in secret. If it succeeds, you walk. If it fails, you're no worse off. And if I tell someone, she pressed, her voice low. He shrugged. Your call. But discretion keeps this alive. Too much attention and the regulators shut me down. She stared at him, weighing his words, then nodded. Fine. When do we start? Tomorrow, he said, a faint smile breaking through. See you at 9. That night she lay awake, the letter tucked beneath her pillow, Ronald's footsteps a soft echo down the hall. She wanted to tell him, to spill this fragile hope, but Lila's shadow loomed, and the secret of her accident festered. She'd keep this to herself until she could stand on her own, until she knew who he really was. Therapy began in clandestine bursts. Amy slipped out twice weekly, her excuses to Ronald flimsy but unchallenged, errands, visits to old haunts. Dr. Hart's clinic was a stark haven, its walls lined with machines that hummed with promise. He strapped electrodes to her legs, ran currents through her nerves, guided her through exercises that left her trembling. Feel anything? He'd ask, tapping her shin with a pen. Nothing, she'd grumble, sweat beading on her brow. Patience, he'd reply, his tone calm, unshaken. It's building. Weeks stretched into months, and the impossible crept closer. A tingle in her toes one session, a faint twitch in her calf the next. She hid it, even from Hart at first, terrified to trust it. Ronald noticed her absences, his questions gentle but probing. One evening he found her in the living room, staring out at the rain-slicked city. "Where do you keep going?" he asked, settling beside her, his voice soft. She tensed, avoiding his gaze. "Just getting out, clearing my head." He tilted his head, studying her. "You've been different lately, quieter." "Did I mess something up?" "No," she said, her throat tight. "It's not you." "Then what?" He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Talk to me, Amy." She pulled away, her heart thudding. "I'm fine, really." He didn't push, but his silence carried weight, and she hated how it tugged at her. One night, after a grueling session, Ronald met her at the door, his shirt damp from the rain, his hair tousled. "Got caught in it," he said, grinning faintly as he shook water from his jacket. "Thought I'd make us dinner." She arched a brow, rolling inside. "You? Cook?" "I'm full of surprises," he teased, heading to the kitchen. He moved with easy grace, chopping vegetables, the scent of garlic and thyme filling the air. She watched, her guard softening as he slid a plate toward her. Pasta, simple but warm. They ate in quiet, the clink of forks, a soft rhythm, and when he brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingered. "You're beautiful, you know that," he murmured, his voice low, his eyes locking onto hers. She froze, heat creeping up her neck. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean it," he said, leaning closer, his hand resting on hers. The air thickened, charged, and she didn't pull away. His lips brushed hers, tentative, then sure, and she melted into it, her hands finding his shoulders. When they parted, breathless, he smiled. "Been wanting to do that for a while." She ducked her head, a rare blush staining her cheeks. "Your trouble, Grayson." "Only for you," he replied, and the warmth stayed, wrapping them in something fragile and new. But Lila prowled closer. Amy spotted her too often, at events near the penthouse, her blonde hair a beacon of threat. One afternoon, Amy returned from therapy, her legs buzzing with faint life, and found Lila in the foyer, her smile sharp. "He doesn't know, does he?" Lila purred, stepping closer. Amy's grip tightened on her chair. "Know what?" "Your little escapes," Lila said, her voice dripping with venom. "Sneaking around. What's the secret, Amy?" Back off, Amy hissed, her pulse spiking. This isn't your business. Lila laughed, low and cutting. Oh, it will be. That night, Lila struck. She cornered Ronald in his office, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She's lying to you, she said, pacing, her tone urgent. She's been slipping out, meeting someone. You think she's yours? She's hiding things, Ronald. He stiffened, his hands clenching on his desk. You're wrong. Amy wouldn't she? Lila cut in, her eyes gleaming. Ask her. Watch her squirm. His jaw worked, doubt seeping in despite himself. The next morning he found Amy in the living room, her gaze lost in the skyline. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded, his voice sharp, raw with betrayal. She jolted, turning to him. Tell you what? You're keeping secrets, he said, stepping closer, his eyes blazing. Lila told me. Your trips, your lies. What's going on? Her chest constricted, hurt flaring hot. Lila, you're taking her word over mine? I'm asking you, he shot back. Why can't you trust me, Amy? After everything? Because I didn't know if I could, she yelled, her voice cracking. You with her, always. How do I know what's real? And there's more. I heard something. My accident wasn't an accident. It was about you. His face paled, shock stealing his breath. What are you saying? Someone wanted you gone, she whispered, tears brimming. And I got caught in it. He staggered back, reeling. Amy, I swear I didn't know. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Dr. Hart. Tomorrow's the final session, he said. Be ready. She hung up, her mind a tempest, Ronald's questions unanswered. The next day she went alone, her nerves alight. Hart greeted her with a grin. This is it, he said, guiding her to parallel bars. Stand. You've got this. She gripped the bars, her legs quaking, and pushed. Slowly, agonizingly, she rose, her breath ragged, tears streaming. I'm standing, she gasped, trembling but upright. You're a wonder, Hart said, beaming. Now take it home. She had to show Ronald. That night a gala filled the estate, guests flooding the halls with laughter and clinking glasses. Amy arrived late, still in her chair, her secret a live wire in her chest. Ronald stood across the room, his tuxedo sharp, his eyes finding hers, still raw, still searching. She wheeled to the center, her heart a drumbeat, and stopped. Ronald, she called, her voice slicing through the noise. He turned, brow furrowing. Amy? What's... She took a breath, gripped the armrests, and pushed. The room hushed as she stood, wobbly but tall, her gown cascading around her. Gasps echoed, Ronald's eyes widening, his breath catching. Amy, he whispered, stepping forward, awe breaking across his face. She smiled, tears falling, and he closed the distance, his hands hovering as if afraid to touch her. You're amazing, he said, his voice thick, pulling her into his arms. She clung to him, the crowd fading, and for a moment it was just them. Raw, real, electric. But her legs faltered, strength draining fast. She crumpled, a cry escaping as she fell, and Ronald caught her, his shout ringing out, Amy! As darkness swallowed her whole. The hospital room buzzed faintly with the hum of machines as Amy blinked awake, the glare of overhead lights piercing through her groggy haze. Her body felt like lead, an ache radiating from her legs, but she was here, still breathing, still whole. The memory of standing, of Ronald's wide-eyed wonder, flickered like a candle in the dark. She shifted, her gaze landing on him, slumped in a chair beside her bed, his dark hair a mess, his tuxedo jacket crumpled over the armrest. His hand rested inches from hers, fingers twitching as if seeking her even in sleep. The sight tugged at her, a quiet warmth battling the doubt that gnawed at her edges. He stirred as she moved, his gray eyes snapping open, locking onto hers with a raw intensity. "Amy," he rasped, bolting upright, his voice thick with relief. "You're awake." Thank God, she swallowed, her throat parched. "Yeah, I'm here. What happened this time?" He rubbed his face, exhaustion carving shadows beneath his eyes. "You pushed too hard. Standing like that, your system couldn't handle it yet. They said it was overload. Your vitals tanked. But you're stable now." He leaned closer, his breath catching. "You stood, Amy. I can't wrap my head around it." Her lips quirked, a faint smile breaking through her fatigue. "Neither can I. Felt like a dream." He reached for her hand, his touch hesitant, as if afraid she'd vanish. "When you went down, I thought I'd lost you again. I couldn't—" He shook his head, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't care if you never walk another step. I just need you here, alive with me." She studied him, her heart thudding against her ribs. "You really mean that? After all the mess? Lila, the secrets?" "Every damn word," he said, his grip tightening, his eyes fierce. "I've been a fool, letting her linger, not seeing what you were carrying. It's you, Amy. Walking or not, it's always been you." Her breath hitched, his honesty slicing through her walls. "I thought maybe you stuck around because of the will. Or pity." "Pity?" He scoffed, leaning in, his voice low and firm. "I stayed because I love you. I should have told you months ago." The confession landed like a spark, igniting something she'd buried deep. "Ronald," she murmured, her voice trembling, tears pricking her eyes. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin, warm and steady. "I'm done with the past. Lila's out. Fired her this morning, cut every tie. She's gone. It's just us now." Her brows shot up, a laugh bubbling out despite herself. "You fired her? For real?" "Straight to her face," he said, a wry grin tugging at his lips. "She stormed out cursing, didn't care. She's nothing next to you." Amy shook her head, the tension in her chest unraveling. "You're insane." "For you? Always." He leaned in, his lips brushing hers, soft, then deeper, a quiet promise sealed in the kiss. When they parted, she pressed her forehead to his, her voice barely audible. "I love you too." He smiled, a rare, unguarded thing. "Good, because I'm not letting you go." Recovery unfurled over weeks, Ronald a steadfast shadow at her side. He moved her into the penthouse's main suite, ignoring her half-hearted protests. "No more guest rooms," he said one morning, scooping her up from her chair as she swatted at him. "Put me down, you caveman," she grumbled, but her arms looped around his neck, her smile betraying her. "Not a chance," he replied, setting her on the bed with exaggerated care, his hands lingering on her hips. "You're stuck with me now." She rolled her eyes, but the warmth stayed. Lucky me. He was there for every therapy session, hovering just out of Dr. Hart's way as she worked to rebuild her strength. She didn't stand again, not yet, but the sensations in her legs grew, a steady hum of possibility. "Looking good," Ronald said one afternoon, leaning against the wall as she finished a set of exercises, sweat beading on her brow. "Stop staring," she shot back, glaring at him over her shoulder. "Can't help it," he said, grinning. "You're a badass." She snorted, but her cheeks flushed. "Flattery won't make me go faster." "Worth a shot," he teased, tossing her a towel. One evening, rain drummed against the penthouse windows, casting a silver glow over the room. They sprawled on the couch, a blanket tangled between them, Ronald's fingers tracing lazy patterns on her hand. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I used to think I had it all, money, the company. But this is what I didn't know I needed." She tilted her head, resting it on his shoulder. "Getting soft on me, Grayson?" "Only for you," he murmured, tipping her chin up. Their kiss was slow, deliberate, heat building as his hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer. She melted into him, her fingers threading through his hair, the world shrinking to just them. When they broke apart, breathless, he smirked. "Still think I'm soft?" "Shut up," she laughed, shoving him, but she nestled back against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Days blended into a fragile, beautiful rhythm. Amy's strength crept back, her legs responding more with each session. Ronald dove into their life, planning quiet nights in, stealing kisses whenever he could. "We should get out of here," he said one night, lying beside her in bed, his arm draped over her. "Somewhere warm. Beach, sun, just us." She turned, propping herself on an elbow. "You trying to sweep me off my feet, billionaire?" "Every day," he replied, his lips grazing her neck, sending a shiver down her spine. "Say yes." "Maybe," she teased, pushing him back with a grin. "You'll have to work for it." He chuckled, pulling her close. Challenge accepted. Then one chilly morning, the world tilted. Amy sat on the bathroom floor, a pregnancy test trembling in her hands. 2 pink lines glared up at her, stark and impossible. Pregnant. Her breath caught, her mind reeling. After the accident, the doctors had all but ruled it out. Her body too broken, they'd said. Yet here it was, a tiny life sparking inside her, fragile and miraculous. She pressed a hand to her stomach, joy clashing with a tidal wave of fear. She stashed the test in a drawer, her hands shaking as she wheeled into the kitchen. Ronald stood there, whistling off-key, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Morning, gorgeous," he called, flashing her a grin. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah," she lied, forcing a smile as she took the mug he offered. "You?" "Like a rock," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "What's on your mind today?" Her heart pounded, the secret burning her tongue. "Nothing much," she mumbled, staring into her coffee. He frowned, setting his mug down. "You sure?" "You look off." "Just tired," she said, avoiding his gaze. "Long week." He didn't buy it, she saw it in the tilt of his head, but he let it slide, sipping his coffee in silence. She watched him, fear coiling tighter. Would he want this? A baby with her, a woman he'd married out of necessity, a woman still piecing herself back together. That afternoon he found her on the balcony, the city sprawling beneath a gray sky. "Hey," he said, sliding an arm around her waist. "You've been quiet all day. What's going on?" She tensed, her voice catching. "Just thinking." "About what?" He turned her gently, his brow creasing. "Amy, you're pale. Talk to me." She bit her lip, her hands trembling. "It's nothing, Ronald." "Really?" He arched a brow, unconvinced. "You're terrible at this. Come on, spill it." Her resolve cracked, tears welling as she pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't know how to say this." His smile faded, worry sharpening his features. "Say what? You're scaring me now." She took a shaky breath, meeting his eyes. "I'm pregnant." Time stopped. His expression froze, shock, then a slow dawning light. "Pregnant," he whispered, stepping closer. "You mean it?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "I didn't think I could. I was terrified you wouldn't—" "Wouldn't what?" he interrupted, his voice rising with urgency. "Amy, are you serious? This is—" He laughed, a bright, disbelieving sound, and pulled her into his arms. "This is the best thing I've ever heard. A baby. Our baby." She clung to him, relief flooding her. "You're sure? You want this? With me?" "More than anything," he said, his hands framing her face, his thumbs wiping her tears. "You, me, a kid. I didn't know I could want something this much until you said it." She laughed through her sobs, burying her face in his chest. "I was so scared you'd walk away." "Never," he murmured, kissing her hair, then her lips, fierce and tender. "I'm all in, Amy, forever." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the wind tugging at their clothes, a new future shimmering just ahead. The penthouse glowed softly under the late afternoon sun, its wide windows framing a city that hummed with life below. 3 years had woven themselves into the fabric of Amy and Ronald's world, threading hope through the cracks of their past. The air carried the faint scent of lavender from a diffuser, mingling with the sound of tiny footsteps pattering across hardwood. Their daughter, Lily, darted through the living room, her dark curls bouncing, a toy plane clutched in her chubby hands. At 3 years old, she was a whirlwind, gray eyes like her father's, a stubborn streak like her mother's, and a laugh that could melt the coldest day. Amy sat on the couch, her legs stretched out, a book resting unopened in her lap. She watched Lily with a quiet smile, her heart swelling at the sight of her daughter's boundless energy. Therapy had paid off. Slowly, steadily, she'd reclaimed her strength, standing more often now, walking short distances with a cane when she felt bold. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, a victory carved from years of grit. Ronald leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his gaze shifting between them, a soft pride etched into his features. "Mommy, look!" Lily squealed, zooming the plane through the air, nearly toppling a vase in her excitement. "Careful, you little tornado," Amy said, her voice warm but firm, reaching out to steady the table. "You're gonna give me gray hair before I'm 40. Lily giggled, undeterred, and raced toward Ronald. "Daddy, fly with me." He scooped her up effortlessly, spinning her until she shrieked with delight. "You're the best co-pilot I've got," he said, planting a kiss on her forehead before setting her down. She scampered off, her plane buzzing as she disappeared into the hall. Amy shook her head, a laugh escaping. "She's got your energy. I'm doomed." Ronald crossed to her, settling beside her on the couch. "Nah, she's got your fire. Keeps me on my toes." He draped an arm around her, pulling her close, his fingers brushing her shoulder. "How are you feeling today?" "Good," she said, leaning into him. "Legs are cooperating. Might even take a few steps later, just to show off." He grinned, his eyes crinkling. "You're already showing off. Every day." She nudged him with her elbow, but her smile lingered. Life had settled into something beautiful, messy, loud, and theirs. Lily's birth had shifted everything, a tiny anchor grounding them through storms they hadn't seen coming. Yet, beneath the joy, a quiet weight pressed on Amy's chest, a secret she'd carried for weeks, waiting for the right moment. That evening, after Lily's bedtime story, Ronald's voice rumbling through a tale of dragons and brave knights, Amy lingered in the nursery doorway, watching him tuck their daughter in. "Night, Daddy," Lily mumbled, her eyes fluttering shut, the plane still clutched in her hand. "Night, Bug," he whispered, brushing a curl from her face before joining Amy in the hall. He closed the door softly, turning to her with a tired smile. "She's out like a light." "Miracle." "She's a handful," Amy said, her voice softer now, her hands fidgeting at her sides. He tilted his head, catching the shift in her tone. "You okay?" "You've been, I don't know, distant tonight." She took a breath, her heart thudding. "Can we sit? I need to tell you something." His brow furrowed, but he nodded, following her to the living room. They sank onto the couch, the quiet stretching between them. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low, laced with concern. "You're scaring me a little." She twisted her fingers together, her throat tight. "I've been waiting to say this, trying to figure out how. It's big, Ronald." He reached for her hand, his grip steadying her. "Hey, whatever it is, we've got this. Just tell me." Her eyes met his, and she exhaled shakily. "I'm pregnant again." The words hung there, heavy and bright, and Ronald froze, his breath catching. "Pregnant," he echoed, his voice a whisper, as if testing the sound. "You're sure?" She nodded, tears brimming. "Found out 2 weeks ago." I didn't believe it at first. After everything, I thought Lily was our one shot. But it's real. His eyes glistened, a slow, overwhelmed smile breaking across his face. Another baby. He laughed, a soft, ragged sound pulling her into his arms. Amy, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She clung to him, relief flooding her as tears slipped down her cheeks. You mean it? I was so scared. I didn't know if you'd mean it. He pulled back, cupping her face, his own tears falling now. I've never meant anything more. You, Lily, this new one, you're my whole world. She laughed through her sobs, pressing her forehead to his. I thought maybe it'd be too much, after all we've been through. Too much, he said, his voice thick. It's perfect. Messy, crazy, perfect. Their lips met, a kiss salted with tears, deep and fierce, sealing the moment. When they parted, he brushed her hair back, his gaze locked on hers. We're gonna be a family of 4. How'd I get this lucky? You married me, she teased, her voice trembling with joy. Best decision I ever made, he murmured, pulling her close again, his hand resting on her stomach. Hey, little one, your dad's already a mess over you. She swatted his arm, laughing. Stop, you'll make me cry harder. Too late for that, he said, grinning through his own tears. Days turned into weeks, the news sinking in, a quiet thrill threading through their routine. Lily, oblivious to the shift, filled their home with chaos and light. One afternoon, she tugged at Amy's hand, her plane abandoned on the rug. Mommy, up! Park! Amy glanced at Ronald, who lounged nearby with a book. You heard the boss, he said, setting it aside. Park time. They headed out, Lily skipping ahead, Ronald pushing Amy's chair when she chose it over her cane. The park buzzed with spring, birds chirping, kids laughing, and Lily raced to the swings, her curls flying. Daddy, push, she demanded, climbing on. He obliged, his laughter echoing as she soared higher. Amy watched, her chest tight with something too big to name. She'd walked short distances now, each step a triumph. But today she felt it, the pull to do more, to meet him without fear. Ronald, she called, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering inside her. He turned, stilling the swing as Lily giggled. Yeah? Help me up, she said, gripping the chair's armrests. His eyes widened, but he crossed to her, offering his hands. You sure? Positive, she replied, her jaw set. She took his hands, her legs trembling as she pushed, rising inch by inch. The cane stayed behind. She didn't need it today. She stood, wobbly but tall, and took a breath. Ronald's grin split wide, pride shining in his eyes. Look at you. She took a step, then another, slow and deliberate, her gaze locked on his. Lily clapped from the swing, squealing, Mommy's walking. The park faded, the world narrowing to just them, Ronald waiting, his arms open. She reached him, her legs shaky but holding, and he caught her as she stumbled into his embrace. You did it, he whispered, his voice thick, holding her tight. No cane, she said, breathless, her arms wrapping around him. Just you. He laughed, a joyous sound lifting her off her feet for a moment before setting her down. You're unstoppable. Lily raced over, tugging at their legs. Me too. Hug. They scooped her up, sandwiching her between them, her giggles filling the air. That night, after Lily slept, Amy and Ronald stood on the balcony, the city twinkling below. His arm circled her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. 2 kids, he said, his voice soft. Think we can handle it? With you? Yeah, she replied, turning to him. We've already got the proof, right here. He nodded, his hand sliding to her stomach. Love's not about being perfect, is it? No, she said, her eyes meeting his. It's about this, us, believing in each other. He kissed her, slow and deep, the night wrapping around them. A family, flawed and fierce, standing together as the stars burned bright above. This story proves that love isn't about physical perfection. It's about the heart. What was your biggest takeaway from Amy and Ronald's journey? Share in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more.